My guest today is Irish writer-director Jamie O'Rourke and his IFTA-winning short film, Calf, which is a gut-wrenching film from way out in the countryside, a place where the worst things are silenced. This gripping and thought-provoking film, produced for Virgin Media Television, has qualified to be considered for the 97th Academy Awards after winning the qualifying award at the Huesca International Film Festival in Spain. Now, the film is brought to life by stirring performances from Isabel Connolly and Cáit. And Isabel Connolly is a rising star in Irish and international cinema and has been tipped to follow in the footsteps of Saoirse Ronan and Eaves. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome writer-director Jamie O'Rourke and his multi-award-winning and gut-wrenching short film, Calf, to the show. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Ward. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that intro. We're delighted to be here and delighted to talk about the film. So,
well, all I can say is once I saw your film, wow, what an incredible short film. But where did you get the idea for this story?
Yeah, it's a dark film, and it definitely comes from somewhere. I think the main source was I was an editor on a documentary in 2018, which was made up of interviews with women who had fled to domestic abuse shelters, and they were recounting their experience to camera. And I guess it was around the same time that the Domestic Violence Act of 2018 was being introduced in Ireland, and what that was legislating for was, up until that point in Ireland, domestic abuse centered around the physical, as opposed to so this act looked to criminalize coercive behavior, manipulative behavior, which was new to me at that point, that wasn't already criminalized, that kind of behavior you couldn't bring a legal case. So that act was being brought in. I was the editor on that, and with those things, obviously you understand that, or we all would understand, that domestic abuse is quite a harrowing subject, and I didn't really understand the impact of sitting with these accounts for so long would have. I just found it very upsetting. It introduced me to statistics I wasn't fully aware of at the time. I think one of the main ones that has stood with me is that 1 in 4 women will face a form of domestic abuse with a current or former partner in their lifetime. And that's an Irish statistic, but it's from a study that was done on a European-wide basis, and those figures quite often they vary slightly, but they are quite often very similar from country to country, and that's quite a huge number of people. And I think if you take 1 in 4, everybody is going to know somebody that may have experienced this type of behavior. So ultimately, that's where the story came from. That working on that documentary and then sitting with it for a while, and those. The story itself is entirely fictional, and that was important to me because I don't think, unless it's a very famous case of domestic abuse, I think bringing a personal story to life like that for the sake of a film wouldn't necessarily always be appropriate. But I think the themes themselves are extremely important that we talk about a little bit more and are more aware of.
I completely agree. Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to actually do an interview with a filmmaker who did a film documentary on domestic abuse. And all of the women who were personally interviewed for that film, they were married. And a lot of them don't have the strength to leave due to certain circumstances, and others, they finally get the confidence and the courage to do something about it. In your film, why did you choose a farm as the location for the story and the plot line?
I think for me, there was a couple of decisions there. One is there in Ireland and in every country, there's areas of those countries that are so remote that you're cut off from the rest of the world, and I felt like that pressure cooker being that kind of, that creates kind of a pressure cooker, I guess, in this moment, or in this decision that Cáit is faced with, that we kind of separating her from the rest of the world and separating the farm and the family from the rest of the world. I also think about these things a bit differently now as well. I think there's, when we think about it from in an Irish context, but probably this maps across other countries in the sense that there's very much an old Ireland, which was under the grip maybe of, Catholicism and the church, where, you were meant to keep things like this hidden away from thing. And in a way, the characters, the mother and daughter, Anya and Cáit, played by Isabel and Cáit Nick, Isabel Connolly, broke brilliant actors. It was such a pleasure to work with. But I think they reflect modern Ireland and maybe an older Ireland. So Anya's character feels like some maybe from that old world where these things are kept on. And now I feel like we speak a lot more about things, about issues, about mental health, about domestic abuse, and it's far more out in the open. And that's in Ireland, and I'm sure it's maps across other countries as well in that sense. So yeah, it was really those kind of things. And farming in Ireland really, farming is a modern practice as well, but it did feel like we were trying to find a place that maybe didn't, that farm, it feels like it could be any time in, the other than the mobile phones, the 90s or the 2000s, and that kind of played into it. That's the crossover, I think, between old and new Ireland. So yeah, that was the choice really around setting it at a farm.
Yeah, because when I looked at the location that you picked to create this story, I thought a farm out in the countryside, away from most people, is a perfect place to hide all of your sins.
Yeah.
And that's where this location, which was a perfect place to tell this story. What I also loved about this film is that you paced the story ever so delicately. I mean, when Koch found her father after the accident, she was in no rush to help him. And I looked at that scene and I'm like, and this was the first time I watched it. Because when I stopped it, when she ran, a lot of the audience is going to think that she ran for help. But
Yes.
when you show in the film that she never said a word, my first thought was, what did he do for her not to pick up the phone or yell for her mother? But then when her mother found him, she did what most wives would have done and called for an ambulance. But at the same time, the mother's reaction is common in many women who have had abusive husbands. So I was wondering if the wife thought that someday that he would change and be a better man, because she could have done the exact same thing as Koch did.
Yeah, I guess with that, I mean, in terms of, I think the nature of making it up seem almost real time is to kind of put the audience in the same situation as both Cáit and Anya, because I think these decisions are being made by them in real time, and they're not with what we might have of the benefit of hindsight or in the not being immediately related. So I guess I wanted, in that sense, that these feel like, Cáit could very well be in shock. Anya the same. These things are all being made under duress. All these decisions are made or being under duress, and I don't think I did. One question that's always been asked of me is, and I don't know the answer to this, is, and I didn't have a specific answer setting out, is on the whether we believe Koch was in the right for her action or inaction, and the same of Anya. I don't think that is essentially what we're digging at here, because I think the answers to those questions are complex and very deep, and I wanted to make sure that the film didn't really try and have a point of view on that, because I don't think there is a right answer to that, you know.
And you did. You did. And that was one of the things that I noticed, but it's also when I watch it, I try to watch a film the first time I watch it as if I'm an audience member. My feeling was watching it for the first time, I didn't judge Conch for her thought process as to should I call for help or should I just let him be? I didn't judge her for that because I think what happens with the way that you filmed her particular scenes, the audience, in a way, is still on her side. Now, of course, we don't know because you were ever so careful to reveal why at the very end. And so it brings the whole picture in a more clear context for the audience.
Mm.
So, for her, she, we think that she ran for help. But like you said, in a moment of shock, duress, what is she thinking? Was there a moment in her thought process that says this is a way out? Because it wasn't just her suffering from the hands of her father. Her thought process to me was also to protect her mother.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, it's a protective in action, definitely. And I guess when I hear you speaking about it there, Ward, it does remind me of certain choices we made in setting up the film. In that it almost feels like a genre film when you drop in the music, in terms of how the framing, the cow. There's a very specific reason to, and not that I often think that explaining films in the granular is important, but I do. There is a certain reason we included the cow and filmed it as such, and we wanted it to feel like the cow was potentially in while calving was, that it felt abnormal. And that's a counter narrative to the rest of the film. So when we see the cow, we see it's in labor, and we can hear and feel its distress. But then when we go into the breakfast and the family situation, that so we feel the cow and that situation is abnormal, and we feel that the family situation is the normal situation. But by the end of the film, that's a counter narrative, right? It reverses. So, and it's kind of to reflect that thing, that hidden aspect of this, that we hide these things behind the veneer of what we might call a normal family, whatever normal means. But if and again with the cow and setting it up a bit in a genre, we wanted to offer the audience, I guess, a sense of, is there potentially something else happening here that is driving either Koch or is responsible for what happened, or and again, that's for multiple reasons. I think if you set it up as a straight drama, it's a very easy understanding what's going to happen and why it's happening. So we're playing with a few different things there, and I often think in genre films, there's often one other aspect of setting it up like that as a horror is quite often violence towards people, not just women, but people in general, is often gratuitous and not really thought out, or does it have a purpose, other than being gratuitous violence? And it's another aspect to maybe think about when we're watching a film, I guess.
Yeah, you shot every scene in this film perfectly. I mean, the audience has no idea. I think there's a couple of clues as to before we get to the reveal towards the end. But I think a lot of the audience, if they're watching it as on the surface as a film and they're just watching it for the story, but then there's going to be those that watch it and go, all right, like I did. I went, what did he do? Because
Yeah.
I went back after I watched it the first time. I went back to that scene where Concha's mother told her, go ask your father if he wants his breakfast. And so she runs out there, and then she sees him. Um, I guess we'll just say in the midst of that accident.
Mhm.
But I kept playing his particular scene over and over again because I'm like, wait a minute. There's something more to his reaction than just telling her to go get help. Because the father's reaction to his daughter, seeing her just standing there, the scene wasn't just about telling her to get help. I kept looking at it, and the thing that kept ringing into my mind was what he had said to her and how he said it. So when I watched it again, I noticed he showed his lack of patience for anything. So I'm thinking, wait a minute. He's the kind of man who uses his insecurity and lack of patience to inflict abuse on his daughter and his wife. So the lack of patience and insecurity in his own life was the catalyst that led him to be an abuser. Did I interpret that right?
Certainly, I think like we have very little. No, no, no. You're very close, and I mean, I guess in the sense that I obviously have a very clear understanding about this family, or before we set out. Like, I mean, as a filmmaker, you tend to try and build character bibles and understand, because when and quite often that's to arm yourself in the our function, I guess, as a director is to kind of communicate with the actors in the best possible way to really elevate their performance, and that's your primary function as a director. And I guess having the answers to whatever questions might pop up, and quite often that can be backstory, that can be character related. So you're quite right. I think obviously what we take into account with Michael, plays the father, or who is the father in the film, is that he doesn't get a whole lot of screen time. And in that moment, he's obviously under a certain type of duress himself. But there definitely is that, how he speaks, and almost an expulsion of anger that is in that moment. But again, there could be multiple reasons for how he and why he's feeling like that. I think one of the reasons why, I quite often, I think, in films that are about domestic abuse, they do, and even anybody, like about serial killers, about anything like that, we tend to be fascinated by the perpetrator. We tend to be fascinated by, because it's the other, and I can understand that at Ted Bundy, or we have a fascination with, because we don't understand it, right? We don't. It's not the thing that we can jump to easily in terms of a mindset or an understanding or a decision making process. For me, I wanted to make sure that this film really was about Cáit and Anya, as opposed to. So in this film, there is obviously a grim aspect to one particular scene, but we don't see any abuse. We don't see, and I think quite often in those situations in films when they center on that, it's not for titillation, but it's for a kind of for more understanding about that side of things. Whereas I really wanted to make a film about Cáit on you specifically.
And you did, and that's the thing that I appreciated was when the twist is revealed towards the end. That that spoke volumes. Just the scene, just the look, um, it just said everything. Because when she went out there to find her father, and then when he goes, for F's sake, I'm like, why would you say that? Because it's almost like saying, what the hell is wrong with you? Go get help. But and I'm like, okay, what did you actually do? Because I knew whatever it was, he was to blame. I mean, I pretty much figured that out pretty quick at that point. But I do like the contrast with the cow and the calf. Now, the cow was in labor and was about to give birth. And so, first, I have to ask: were there special effects involved in the areas of the cow?
Yeah, the cow and the calf are not real. They were built by somebody, by a guy called Philip Hoy, who made the cow out of. I don't want to break the illusion of behind the filmmaking things, very, but he made it out of fake fur and pipes and gaffer tape, and yeah, and I think they had a motor for the cow breeding and everything. It's amazing what people
Oh,
creative.
it
Yeah,
looked real. It looked real. I'm thinking now either it was special effects or they actually found the cow in labor and was lucky enough to film it at that moment. Um, but I loved how you added that aspect into this film because when when the mother I guess she was sitting in the dining room or in the kitchen, and there were other people there with her when Conch came in. The first thing the mother said to her was, "Did the calf come?" And I'm like, okay, she is most likely trying to find a some sort of maybe a bit of joy in a terrible moment because she's sitting there in complete shock.
yeah. I think that is very. You hit the nail on the head there. She's in shock, and she kind of comes out of it a little bit. I guess in terms of the delivery of the calf, I mean that shows a few different things. It's kind of almost from a metaphorical point of view, maybe a sense of rebirth, a sense of, but certainly showing how Koch really takes responsibility in these situations, and in some ways, kind of adopts more of a mother role than Anya. Even though I think those things are very complex in that situation. I think, I don't think, I think both characters, have speak volumes about that situation. I don't think that in any of those situations there's room for blame or anything like that. I think it's just such a complex area, and I think that's really for me what the ending is about. And again, not to over explain or anything,
No,
but
no,
is
no. I'm trying. I don't want to spoil the ending because people need to have the same emotion and the effect in which this film was intended to bring.
Oh, absolutely. No, but more so so I think around the idea that we're talking about the right or wrong of coaches in action, more it's about, even though the situation has 100% has completely changed, this factor has gone from a life. I think the trauma from these things isn't just immediately cauterized and goes away and heals. I think that ending is to reflect that this is something that will carry with for forever. There's hope in there. You need to find it, I think, but there's also that idea that this goes further than the story. I think,
And
and I
and
think
and
that's important. That it's not just there's no clean ending to any of these situations. I think is
and I'm
important.
glad you did it that way, and because it ended perfectly. I think when Conch came in to the house when her mother was sitting down, the daughter knew the abuse was over. The mother was still in shock with some very many thoughts going on in her head from being free from the abuse, but also looking at the challenge of keeping the farm up and running. She gave Conch a look. It's very quick. She gives her a look, and I kept thinking, is the look a question to Conch saying, "Did you already know?" I mean, when I sent you out there, did you already know? And you didn't
I
say anything, and so I'm like, that
I can
it could
tell
be
you exactly
interpreted.
what I told Kate, the actor who played Anya, who played the mom, if you want. I mean, I told Kate that to ask her to. I didn't tell Isabel that Kate was going to look at her like that,
Mm-hmm.
but I told Kate to find. And I asked him not to say anything. We did have lines for that scene, but I changed my mind at the end and said, "Let's just do it silent." But what I told Cáit is that that Michael told you. That was the direction, and let her process that. So I guess how she acted in that scene and how Isabel was totally in the, and I think that's the great thing about relationship with actors is you, in the best cases, I think, I'm quite inexperienced as a director. I've made a few short films, but in the best cases, what I can see from really good actors like Cáit and Isabel, is that you give them information and that they absorb it and then adopt it, and how they've interpreted and want to portray this character and their decision making, really gets is something that they create, and yeah, you can see in that moment how good they both are.
Well, it's even in the ending scene because the mother gives that look,
Hmm.
and I'm just like, oh, because you leave, and I'm not going to give this ending away because, ladies and gentlemen, when you ever have the opportunity to see this film, you have got to see this film. But the ending scene leaves so many interpretations for the audience. And this is why I love films like this, because you created a film in which the audience is going to leave the theater and they're going to be thinking, and they are going to be writing their own ending to your film. And that's what makes films like this so brilliant.
Oh, well, thanks. I do think that's an important thing to try and do, with a film, is to pose some questions, not offer. I don't think offering clean answers is certainly not from. It's not something I consider, because I think you're right about there. You want people to go away and think about it and ponder, and I guess in this particular film and take on the weight of that as a topic we're dealing with. It's not a light topic. It's heavy. It's hard. And I think when everyone searches, and thinks back, there's more. It's what we're so aware now, and we have such good terminology for what we can ascribe as abuse. Whether it's coercive behavior, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's emotional or mental abuse. There's so many forms, and when we think back through all of our past, things can come out of the shadows and you can go, oh, you can almost put a name on it now, you can put a thing on it. And I think those are the things, even though it's not an easy subject to think about, it's certainly one that this film, that we want to kind of leave people with at the end, just to even be thinking about it,
Yeah, and I love the fact that the birth of the calf, when I saw it, I looked at it as a sign of a new beginning for both the wife and the daughter. Because when a woman is pregnant and they have natural childbirth, joy comes after the pain. That's how I looked at their situation. Of course, joy isn't going to come immediate to the mother and daughter, but the way that you told their story and then inserted this element of the cow and the calf. And I just love the way you did this whole film. But how
No,
in the
thank you.
world did you come to cast Isabel and Cáit?
I was very lucky in both instances, that I had come across both of them. Cáit was in a film called Song of Granite, and she was also in a film called On Colleen Q and the Quiet Girl, which was nominated for an Oscar maybe 2 years ago, I think. It's a Colin
Yeah.
Barrett film. Both phenomenal films. Um, and Isabel I'd come across in a short film called Pale Saint, I believe. I could be wrong on that. But I'd also seen her in brief appearances and other things, and she was in God's Creatures with Paul Mescal, and I offered it to both of them, first, and they both said yes. So I was very lucky in that instance, and they were both extremely, from the very start. Isabel was on a TV show called Domina, I think, in Rome, and it was during COVID. And their scheduling changed, and it ended up overlapping with our film dates. But her and her agent managed to convince them to unchange it, which is completely unheard of for a short film, you know. And she went to the effort to do that, and Cáit did an extreme amount of research to before, you know, doing the role, which is in both those cases. That's you don't really with these. Now, we were incredibly lucky to have a budget that was provided by Virgin Media and Screen Ireland, but with a short film budget, you know, it doesn't really stretch to having a lot of prep or a lot of you know, rehearsal time or anything like that, because it's just not, the money's just not there. So you really, it's on, you know, both Cáit and Isabel did it first, way below what they would probably command as film and TV actors, you know, and that was just for the want of doing the film. So we were incredibly lucky and privileged in that sense.
Yeah, I loved the minimum use of dialogue.
Yeah.
And this really comes from not only your direction, but Calm Hogan was your cinematographer. Now, I don't know what it is with Irish filmmakers, but I have never seen a bad film come out of Ireland. It's either the Guinness or it's the film angels have blessed that country.
Oh, well, two things there actually. You know what? One, you mentioned dialogue there. There's little dialogue in many of my films because I'll be honest, I'm pretty bad at writing it. So I do think it's on us as filmmakers to tell a story through the image. You know what I mean? That's where ultimately where well, I mean, it's an intersection of loads of things. Colin is an unbelievably brilliant cinematographer, and he's a friend and a constant collaborator. I've shot a couple of more films. There's one thing there. I think there's a little bit of truth in the sense that Ireland has, you know, we've got a lot of filmmakers that have come out, and we almost seem to punch above our weight in terms of the amount of people that are in the country versus the amount of storytellers. But I do think that's kind of half the story. I mean, particularly with short films, I don't know another country. So every year, CAF was made under a funding stream called Discovers, where aspiring filmmakers can apply for a budget to make a short film, and they give it 2.5. But every year, there's 25 to 30 short films made in this country funded by Irish taxpayer money, so from the government, that get funds by organisations like Screen Ireland, and then Virgin Media also for this one, CAF or Discovers, they provided the budget along with Screen Ireland. I think that's part of it as well. You know, like this idea that it's just an innate, you know, organizations like that are really getting involved in grassroots of filmmaking here. And I don't know too many other countries where you can make short films outside private investment. Do you know what I mean? And where they're actively funding 25 new filmmakers every year with the chance to make a short film. And I've received funding two or three under two or three of those, and it's an incredible way to develop your craft before you, because there's obligations when you make a feature, whether they're commercial or that you know, there's a lot more pressures that come on a filmmaker when you get to that stage. And it's a lovely dynamic to make short films where you're not faced with those. You can just really figure out how you tell stories, what type of stories you want to tell, and in what manner you do so, you know. So we're incredibly lucky to have the likes of Screen Ireland and Virgin Media in Ireland that are supporting us every year. I really think so.
Now
You know?
you have won you have won multi awards with this film. What has been the audience's reaction when they see it?
It's not an easy film. It's not I guess there's you get a range of emotions. You get people that can get quite upset about it, and I don't mean that just upset in a very negative way, as in it might trigger some, you know, uh, real experience or some understanding. I've had lovely conversations with people. I've had, because it's maybe screened in various places in the world. I've had a chance to travel to different countries representing the film and getting to chat to people. And I guess that's one aspect of it. It's screened in. I didn't get to go to Korea, but it was in Korea, Finland, Canada, the US, throughout Europe, and you really get a sense that this is a universal theme. And I think that's potentially why it's maybe traveled so well, is that we all understand that this happens. We all are aware. We know it happens within our families. It happens within our friends' families, and we hear about this. So I think that is one aspect of maybe it's success on a festival level that is very rewarding. You get to talk to people. You get to represent a film. But you're right. It's people definitely react differently to the film. It's a tough film to watch, but I have only ever had conversations with people that are positive about their experience of it, and
Yeah, it can only be positive for what this film brings. Now, you won the IFTA for best
Mhm.
short film. That's a very, very big award. Now you're Oscar qualified. How does that feel?
I think with all of these things, they're great, and I think you have to certainly. I'm getting better at taking time to enjoy it, or certainly enjoy it with the people that making a film like this, it involves a crew and cast of a huge, a huge amount of people, and moments like that are really great to enjoy it with some of those people. I think it's such a good collaborative medium that you should really take time. It is strange in the sense that we made this film nearly 2 years ago, and or maybe a year and a half ago, so there is a kind of element that you're while you're working on other things, this is kind of happening as a sidecar, I guess. But it's great. It's really I think it's those things like the IFTA and the long list and whatever festival successes that happen. I think it's great on every level, not just obviously for us as filmmakers, but really just because of what it's about, and people seeing it is the important thing. I think that's the one aspect of short films that is quite unusual now that I see it, how they the whole world operates with regards to short films, is they get seen at festivals, but they kind of go into a kind of cupboard after that. They don't really get seen in the same extent that feature films, that people don't have access to them after the fact, so I think that is one very good aspect of all of that, is that the film gets to get seen by a bigger audience, and we think about the themes a bit more on a wider level, I guess. Yeah.
So, you have any new projects coming up?
I do. I have another short film called The Afters, which we're just about finished the edit on. It's a absurdist social horror about class and social anxiety. It's about a guy who gets trapped at a never-ending Irish elite wedding. So that is again funded by Screen Ireland, who have been very kind to us. And then after that, I think hopefully I'll start developing. I'm writing a few feature films at the moment, so hopefully that will be the next step afterwards. But
Well, when you get them all done, you're going to have to come back.
absolutely, of course, I'd love to. I'd love to. And we'll have to have you over again, Ward. I believe you've been in Ireland a couple of times. Is that right?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, it's been a decade or so, but I was blessed enough to stay out of Dublin and go into the heart of Ireland, from Limerick to Cashel and the towns
Oh,
in
amazing.
between, or I should say the pubs in between. but but no, it's probably one of the most beautiful countries that I've ever seen. And again, Ireland is multi shades of green for a very, very good reason. And I
Yeah.
can't wait to come back. And when I do, I'll look you up, Jamie.
Oh, I think there's a few of us over here that owe you a pint anyway, Ward, when you get over here. Yeah, we'll definitely welcome you with open arms. And actually, now you mentioned Limerick there, this film was shot in Limerick. The production company Carbonated Comet are based in Limerick, and we shot all of this down in Limerick. So you might have recognized some of the fields on that farm. But
Well, the coolest thing about Limerick, and ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who have never been, Limerick is the home of the Shannon River, which actually flows in the opposite direction. And it's the craziest thing to see it because depending on which side of the bank you're on, some of you may not even know. So, but it's a beautiful town and a beautiful city, but Ireland itself is completely beautiful. But ladies and gentlemen, Jamie O'Rourke's short film Calf is about a sinister farm accident and leaves Cáit with a terrible decision to make. But Calf touches on its central theme of domestic abuse in a very sensitive and considered manner and is a poignant exploration of shock, grief, and trauma that delivers a much deserved catharsis. It poses tough questions for the audience, but there are never easy answers when a family is in the grip of abuse. Now, Calf, well, it has it all as an award-winning short film. The storyline is on point, and when a story places questions into the audience with, what would I have done in that situation? You have the makings of a winner. Now, the cinematography is dark, could be a bit lifeless of color as it should be since domestic violence only brings the colors of blood and bruises. But the acting of both Isabel and Cáit bring an authenticity to their roles as abused women, but also you see the glimpses of an inner strength that is born with the symbolism brought on by the calf in the barn. This film will cause you to think, and one's sins will not stay hidden in the dark for long. This film exposes those sins and brings them into the slow sunrise of an Irish farm. Jamie, I want to thank you for sharing this incredible film with us today.
oh no, thank you for having me, Ward. That's what a way to finish an interview. Thank you very much for those words. It's been great chatting with you. Flew by, but yeah, thank you so much for having us.
You are very, very welcome. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you ever have the opportunity to see the short film Calf, you've got to put it on your list. If you're going to visit a film festival where it is showing, be sure to be sitting in that audience. And well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for watching. And as for me, I'll either see you at the movies or from the red carpet.